You know, you've had very interesting portfolios in the past. You know, you've been Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Defence, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for the Environment, Parliamentary Secretary to the Finance Minister. With that kind of an experience, what would you do different today if you were in power compared to what is happening currently under the existing economic conditions?
Well, I guess first of all, I wouldn't have denied that, in fact, the recession was coming. As you know, we had a snap election, which was trying to, I guess, in many ways, forestall what the inevitable was, which we were going into a slump. What I would not have done, quite frankly, and I've been Parliamentary Secretary, is that for every dollar we spend, we have to find a dollar. Money doesn't grow on trees. And so we had a $3 billion contingency fund, which essentially said that if we didn't spend that $3 billion, we were able to use it for either pay down the debt, or if we had, in the case of SARS, you had money for a rainy day. When you take, for example, the GST, which is always a very popular issue one way or the other, for every percentage point, you are basically costing the taxpayer about $6 billion a year, every year. So as soon as you shave put 2 points off, you're $12 billion right there in the hole. So when the current government came in 2006, they had a $12.5 billion surplus. Now we're about $60 billion in the hole. The fact is that governing is about priorities. One of the things I don't hear is the innovation agenda. I would have done more resources and shown more leadership in innovation and said, let's put our money into and helping partner with both academia and with the private sector in that regard. When we were the government, we created 500 chairs of excellence. What did that do? That brought the best and the brightest home to Canada. It kept the best and the brightest here. We had research chairs, which essentially what those research chairs did is that it meant we had researchers who came to Canada or stayed in this country and worked on things like multiple sclerosis and cancer. Because, again, you have to be on the leading edge. For me, it's about the fact that we had worked so hard over the years to eliminate the deficit. And stimulus projects are important. But the fact is, we really don't know where this money is going. It has not been, as the Auditor General said, and certainly as the parliamentary officer dealing with the budget, parliamentary officer, has indicated, we really don't know what the stimulus is. We announce things, we see all these announcements, but are we seeing shovels in the ground? So we need to look at the innovation side. I think as a government, it's so easy to get into a deficit situation. And therefore, what I would like to know now is, what's the strategy to get out? Okay, you're into this situation. We understand that. So, what's the exit strategy? How do we get out of that situation so that your children, your grandchildren, and future children are not saddled with such a significant deficit? And that's not even touching, of course, the fact that we have about a $500 billion debt in Canada. So I think in terms of our strategy has to be certainly in that. It's about the jobs for tomorrow. It's making sure that we are dealing in the short term with some of these retraining issues. It's making sure that we are, we put all that money in the auto sector, and heaven knows the auto sector is very important to Canada, but what are we doing to ensure that the jobs of tomorrow are there? Because the auto sector will never be the way it was in the past. And I think one of the best jobs I ever had was Parliamentary Secretary to Finance, both to Mr. Martin and to Mr. Manley. There's an old saying that all roads lead to finance, they just don't lead out of finance necessarily. Because the Minister of Finance is the only minister who is sitting at the cabinet table who doesn't want to spend money necessarily. And I was given one of my many assignments from Mr. Martin was to go to each cabinet minister and basically say, you have to cut 5%. Well, ministers aren't in the business of wanting to cut. And so some of them are kicking and screaming. In the end, they all did. But we always have to review our budgets. Just because you have money that was here for X projects 10 years ago doesn't mean that they should be here today. And you, of course, of all people know, because you are on the leading edge in your own industry, how important it is to be ahead of the curve, and how important it is not to do things just because we did it this way means we should continue to do so. So that was very good for me, and it led to the fact when I was the Junior Minister of Environment with Mr. Dion, his first assignment was, you got to get me the budget so that we can do the kind of climate change issues that need to be done. And I asked Mr. Dion at the time, and how do you expect me to do that? And his simple response was, I don't know. You were the Parliamentary Secretary to Finance. I'm sure you'll figure it out. We got $13 billion, and that meant that we could start to really put into practice what we needed to do. And a lot of people say, well, geez, the emissions went up under the Liberal government. Well, that's also because the tar sands, but also because the economy was booming. But finally, once we got the money, we were able to then start to put into what was called Project Green at the time, and start to deal with the 700 largest emitters, to deal with some of the key issues. But it all comes down to that government is there, it's the public, you have to prioritize what you want, and there are no short-term fixes in this, in the political arena as in anywhere else.
Bryon, you're a well-wisher of the multicultural communities. From the time I've known you, you've been a very hard-working politician. In addition to you being a successful federal member of parliament, you started your career after you graduated with your master's degree in political economy. You started actually as a provincial, not provincial, in the municipal